This is Andy B on the Get Your Home Show. That right then was the news. Just after 5 o'clock, we have got a guest with us today. Now, ordinarily, Mondays and Wednesdays, we have an amazing plethora, a smorgasbord, if you will, of guests. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have my regulars. We have Richard Scott, the good doctor, on a Tuesday, and Lord Jackson on a Thursday. Today, if you look at your watches or your calendar and you check it out with a wasp, you will find out is a Monday, which means I get to do this. Hello, Ryan.
Great to see you. What an introduction.
I know. Well, you see, I like my introductions. It's good fun. So Ryan, let's just keep some simple stuff, because we have to acknowledge your wife has been interviewed by me not that long ago. So you are husband of, but I like to go a bit deeper than husband of, wife of, because of course you're more than that. You are that, but you're much more than that. So I thought, having chatted with you ever so briefly, let's have a proper interview and do this for real. So just give us a bit of an idea. What does your day normally look like?
I'm Lisa's husband. That's not the answer you wanted, is it? I run a company called Always Better Than Yesterday. I support and develop heart-centered leaders. I really believe that we all have gifts and skills and talents that are crying out to be brought to the world in service of other people. So that's my joy and my pleasure, and I get to support and serve great people, and it's a blessing. I get to talk to great people like yourself as well,
which is always really, really cool. How does that work then? Is that podcasts? Is that interviews? Is that sort of virtual support, physical support? How does that work?
Yeah, in a former life, I used to have a career in the UK police service as a civilian, and as I grew in my leadership journey, I trained to be a professional coach, which is not like in the sports world, but it's effectively personal development, career development, and so I was doing that within the police service, but they weren't really maximizing what it's there for, which is about to unlock potential. I was just really coaching people who were a bit of a performance problem, and the managers were outsourcing their responsibility. So I just started to do that a bit more on the side, do it at home. And I built this little community, and then the podcast kind of came along with that. So I guess you could say, a bit like yourself, I just ask great questions for a living.
Which is really good fun. I love it. I was interviewing a bunch of folk yesterday, a film screening, and I love it when you ask a question and the first thing they say is not the answer to the question, but, oh, that's such a great question. I know I've done something good right there. If I could replicate that every time, I would be really, really happy. But occasionally you just get the right question, and somehow asking the right question, it just opens up a conversation in a way that you perhaps didn't plan, but is so much better.
Yeah, and I just mentioned a minute ago about heart-centered leadership, and all matters of the heart. They're a little bit deeper than the surface. They're a little bit deeper than what might be the expectation. So it's a real pattern interrupt when you speak to someone about what do they really care about, what are they really passionate about. Those really do take us a moment just to stop and think and go, what is my answer to that question?
Yeah, it really is. I asked someone a question last night, and they says, "Oh, I can't possibly answer that. How would I ever know the answer to that question?" I'm thinking, well, that was quite a good question. Anyway, they then proceeded, as they were thinking, to start to talk and gave me 5 answers, which was superb to one question. It's funny because sometimes we just don't realize that the answer, the information is here, because we can't necessarily immediately grasp it. We just have to reach for it. And that's why I kind of ramble on a bit. It gives people time to think, I suppose. It's not intentional. It's just kind of what happens. It's not on purpose. But then he came up with these amazing, deep replies, because I was asking, what have you learned about, the kind of World War II period that the film was about that you didn't know before? I don't know anything. And then trotted out all this amazing information, which I'd never heard of before. It was phenomenal. And that's the thing of a decent question. It helps somebody to really think through, I suppose, who or what or when they are in the world. How do they interact with those around them? The good questions can really help somebody understand who they are.
Are there any more powerful questions than, who do you say I am? You've been a great mentor of mine, because, I would go as far as saying probably ask some of the most simple yet great and profound questions that we'll ever read.
Totally agree with that one. Right, so that's your day job. You've got a family as well, which we want to come into all that. How is it going? Because your wife's busy trying to get the bands going. She's growing it from nothing. She's now got a drummer who we've also chatted with, and who's great. How are you coping, kind of supporting her in this role that she's got some experience with in the past, but now this is literally her baby? How is supporting her working out?
Yeah, far better than it would have done a few years ago. I've been on a real journey. I guess I've been on a bit of a development journey myself, a bit of maturation required. And, you know, in the early days of our marriage, we were probably working a lot in silos, doing our own thing. And I've really got to a place now where I'm actually probably the more stable one. I've always kind of been a bit more chaotic, a bit more kind of putting my energy out of the home into the world, into the business. And actually, the last couple of years has been great to support my wife and support my two children who are transitioning to big school, and actually it's been a real, I absolutely love it, just being dad and husband, to see what God's doing in their lives, to the character and the people that they're becoming and the things that they're sharing the world with the world. So yeah, I hope that she would say that I'm handling it really well. Hope that I'm providing her the stability and the consistency and the provision for her to just go out fully expressive, share her heart with the world.
Which is one of the things I really loved when I had ever such a brief conversation with you after having interviewed Lisa on this show weeks ago now. I just want to delve a bit deeper into some of that relationship stuff that you guys had, which was really interesting because she was very delicate, sort of talking about some parts. But I wanted to ask you some deeper parts of that, because your life now, you both would describe yourselves as Christians, so that's transformed your life. Paint a picture for us of what the life was really like on a day-to-week basis. And you've given us a few closed silos and stuff, and I suppose energy outside of the home rather than in. But paint a picture for us on a day-to-week basis when it wasn't going so well.
Yeah, so Lisa and I have been together since we were 15, so that's 24 years. We met each other at school, and good kids. Like we really did want to build a life together, love each other. But I guess what we'd say is we didn't really know how to do that. And I think, we were fine with work, and then two kids, married, and two kids come along, and we kind of built this life that creates a bit of stress and creates a bit of pressure. And you really find out the test of one's character when you're under a bit of stress and one's pressure. And I probably, each of us would probably say we didn't handle that as good as we could do, because we just didn't know. We just didn't know that the way that we behaved under stress, and particularly for me, how I would have, my presence would have changed whilst under stress. And being honest, I was a young lad in need of a lot of love. My upbringing left me feeling and believing that I wasn't worthy. I get abandoned by those who love me, and an insecure version of me, when we had children, was actually quite jealous of the attention that the children got. And so I wasn't able to deal with it in the most mature way. I probably was overly needy, which would have repelled her. And so it's a bit of a mess. You got two young parents that want to, create a wonderful family, but just keep missing each other. And I would say we weren't anywhere near faith. I probably had daddy issues because, my dad left when I was very young. So faith I wouldn't even say it was on my radar. It would have been the antithesis. I would have been anti, and I was very anti, because I was never going to open myself up to be let down by an imaginary father figure. I'd already knew what the real one was like, so why would I open myself up to an imaginary letdown? And so, we got to a point where we're trying to deal with it best we can, and I'll pause for breath in a minute, but Lisa found in our suffering, in her suffering, she found faith. And I found a get out clause. I was receiving counsel of the world that just says, just go and be happy. If you're happy, the kids will be happy. And I got to a point where I nearly gave up hope. And the advice was probably the worst advice I could have ever received, because it was self-focused. And I really needed at some point someone at that point just to grab me by the ear and go, "Come on, son. Like, be a man, be there for your family." And I didn't have that. I didn't know what it looked like. So I'll pause there. Lisa finds faith, and it kind of makes things worse for us.
So part of that I definitely can understand. My dad left when I was 4. When I had my first son, I just thought, well, I've seen some guys around me. Some of them are doing quite well, I think, and some of them less so. So it gave me some form of framework, very loosely. I was really blessed in one regard that God had kind of sent me these three different father figures from very different families. There was one that was very much like a spiritual father, and he would sit me down and talk about life and how I felt and what was going on in the world and how did I work with that. There was another guy who was Mr. Practical. He showed me how to do wheel spins and handbrake turns and bought me a bag of chips. And it was some of the good practical dad stuff that I'd not had. And then there was a third guy. I used to spend lots of time with them and their children when they had children and be there in their lives. We'd go on holidays together. And so I had these three different families, different blokes, but different aspects of a dad. And a lot of that was very helpful. But again, it's still fragmented, right? Because this isn't one person to look at. This is different people with different families and different situations. And so when I had my own son for the first time, there's that, what am I supposed to do? I don't have a father figure to look to and think, yeah, he did a good job. He did not do a good job, much like, I guess, in some ways you, maybe for different reasons. But it meant I'm thinking, well, how do I do this? I mean, I was a Christian at this point. My wife was a Christian. We got married in a really good context, but I've got this massive void of what does a dad look like? What should a dad look like? Now, I had a good relationship with God, but there was a physical element missing but I don't know what that's like. And when a problem would come along and what am I supposed to do here? So all I could do is pray more and lean on God more, which was hard and it was good. But I say all that just to say I understand some of the parts of how do I be a good dad when there isn't that role model, which is why for me I'm so passionate. How do I support men generally? Because if I can help a guy to be more of who he should be as a man, and embracing the masculinity, which is so critically valuable in this world and being destroyed. We need it because it goes perfectly against being feminine. And how do I help men do that? That's why I've launched the men's mag, in part because being a man's a great thing, right? We're pretty much every other person. So that means it matters how we behave or don't behave, which is really, really important. How did that transfer then? Because you said that Lizzie became a Christian, found faith, and it got worse. How can that possibly get worse for people who are listening thinking, well, that's a good thing, surely?
I was just angry with her. I thought that was a really passive way of solving our marriage problems, being completely crude and honest. She just needed to love me more. That would have fixed all of our problems. But the reality is, it was deep character work. It was a deep transformation of the heart and understanding how to love each other properly. And in many respects, I had to do a lot of healing. I had to go and realize where I were believing the lies where I wasn't loved, where I was believing the lies that I could be rejected and abandoned, and stop searching for that outside of myself. And stop holding her ransom to be the one to provide me that. I can say that now with absolute clarity, some 7 years, but that's not the logical conclusion you come to when you're in the midst of it. But, it made me angry because I thought it was a passive solution. But so I had great intentions. I don't do things by half, so I was all in, and we're really kind of like, we've banged our heads together, and we're kind of like, right, let's sort this out. What a beautiful family we have. Let's kind of figure this out. And she's like, I want you to come with me to Big Church Festival. I'm like, pardon? You want me to go to a festival of 40,000 Ned Flanders? I'm like, no. But off I went, and secretly, don't tell anybody, I loved it. I'm a people watcher. I'm a psychologist, and I was just watching. I was hearing the likes of worship music I'd never heard before. Somehow they were all speaking directly to me. I don't know how that works. And, and just I'm people watching and I love authentic people. I love fully expressed people. And I'm watching these different crowds just having full on open worship. And I'm like, wow, what is this? This was completely different to any kind of church I'd ever been to for kind of like christenings and weddings. Like, sure. And here's the important thing it did for me. I wouldn't say I became a Christian there and then. But what it did is it broke the identity that I'm not like that. I had no comeback. There was all walks of life. I had no defense to say this was not who I am. This isn't for me, because like God just showed me there and then, this is my church.
It's funny how we have these perceptions. I've got a phrase I've used for a long time. Sometimes perception trumps reality. And it's because so often we see what we think we can see. We understand it through our own filters of life. and then we see what's going on, and we then, because we've got those filters, we then know what's going on, even though it's not what we know. Social media is classic. We see the snapshots of wonderfulness. We don't see all the misery and pain in between that. Therefore, perception starts to trump the reality of what's going on. So in a sense, it sounds like you've gone with a reality in your head of those perception of here's what Christians are like. And I guess in a sense, in the nicest possible way, it shocked and shook something loose in you.
Yeah, something that I couldn't see the world the same way ever again.
Which is always a good thing, but a scary thing when we lose something that we held secure. It's like being uncomfortable or rather comfortable with the uncomfortable. You know, we can have that thing that we don't like, that we hang on to and it hurts, but we know it's there, right? So therefore we know if I can feel pain, I can feel. We don't think, well, we don't need to feel pain. We just get focused into, but I can feel pain, therefore I am. And I guess that's where that experience came in, because that authentic element of worship, that's the sort of thing where something like Big Church Festival, and there are plenty of them, that can come out because people aren't in a church, they're not in a context that has to be done in a certain way, and that's nothing wrong with that. They can be much more free, and that then allows the authenticity to be expressed, perhaps in extremes, which is almost an oxymoron, but I think that's actually probably true.
Yeah, and do you know what? Big Church is it was almost our annual pilgrimage. We went, bar the COVID years, we went every year, 5 years on a trot. And, you know, there's always been milestones to that festival. You know, I remember being there on day one, and it was Pat Barrett. Into Faith I Go, I think, was the main one that I kind of took away. And, you know, without getting too far ahead, we kind of go the following year, and my family are going to bed, and I'm intentionally getting out, and I'm going to the worship tent late at night, and I'm hearing another message from Pat Barrett, which is talking about as for me and my house. And it was almost like my own kind of a hero's journey, my own kind of like archetypal journey of going from like so far away from it, prodigal son, then kind of stepping into that kind of spiritual leadership within the home. It's been an arc, and it's definitely been a journey.
The best journeys are never short. I would say
it's still happening. It's still happening.
Well, this is the thing, and I know that, which is really partly why I wanted to talk to you. So, I mean, just sort of to go through some of what we said. So, you're not living anything to do with faith as a couple. It's nothing necessarily bad. You're just not living a faith-like kind of life. Lisa finds faith. You then start on the periphery. Big Church is obviously part of that. How did it change from you being so opposed to this is just her passive solution, as opposed to, do you know, this is something I need to engage with personally?
Well, so I used to drop her off to church. She used to go to church and with the kids, and then she was just like, oh, you know, come in. And I think I must have just gone once or twice, and then it was like a Father's Day. So I was like, right, okay, like I'll go in on Father's Day. The pastor of the church used to be my school teacher, and he was the type of school teacher that would talk about anything but the subject. You know, all the lads loved it. He would be talking about the England starting lineup before he'd be talking about the thing we should be learning about, right? So I could go in and listen to Mr. Wiley and down at Vineyard Church in Trowbridge back in 2019. And it was Father's Day, and he said, you know, come on, men, we're going to do, I guess, I can't remember the word, commissioning. We'll say some nice things about the men. Come down the front. And all I remember is I'm just stood there about to receive, got my eyes closed, thinking, oh, it's a bit uncomfortable. And he said, that's it, women. If you want to put your hands out towards these men, you do that. And all I can say, Andy, is like my wife Hadoukened me in my spine. Like there was just some fireball that she threw from her hands into my spine. My entire body caught fire. I walked back to her in the pews. My eyes were streaming. And I just said, I feel like a child of God, and I don't want to talk about this ever again. Father's Day 2019 was my adoption day, and I think that was a big part of it. I think I had a heart experience that my mind made no sense of, that I've spent the last 6-7 years just, I guess, not trying to understand what happened anymore, trusting that I was refathered in that day, and I've sought to become a good, beloved son and disciple ever since.
Situations like that can be hard to explain. I mean, in a sense, it can be hard for us to understand it, let alone then verbalize that. Let then somebody actually understand it. What transformed in your life? Because one of the things that the Bible says, I think it's an older version, which I really like, this particular bit, is you'll be known by your fruit. What was the fruit in your life before and after that moment? How did it? What's sort of the tangibles that changed?
Yeah, when it comes back to the stress thing, we had no grace for each other. It's almost like the behavior equals the character. If I were, I used to have a terrible habit of just, if I didn't feel heard or understood, just raise my voice, right? And I guess for Lisa, that her perception would be, that's just who I am. That's just what I do. And I guess what we've been able to do through the fruit is to have a bit of grace, to have a bit of perspective, and to understand that actually those behaviors are probably fruits of someone struggling or suffering. And do you know what? Over a series of years, like, you wouldn't hear that from me, and so that's just one example. Grace, being able to have our children now are in life groups and the fruit, and they're and they're understanding their own paths. We're discipling friends and family members, not because we're evangelicals, but because we're practicing the way, we're loving the way. And it's hard for me to describe, really. I think the best people to kind of give testimony is the people around us to tell you what they truly see. But yeah.
It does change you though, but there is an important part of this, because I know folk who've come to a church. There's a classic one of a Christingle service and a really good old traditional Church of England church. It's a Christingle. It's dark. There's candles. There's gentle light, and you can have quite an emotional experience just by the very nature of the fact that it's dark and there's nice music and there's candles and it's very warm. It's very reassuring and comforting. That on its own can be quite impactful, and that's a good thing. Yeah. But there's also a point where you have to get past that. Yeah. I'm experiencing something to it making you want to do something different, as opposed to just experiencing it, which is that back to that happiness thing that you said you were trying to be happy. Actually, it makes you want to do something for others, and that, I think, is one of the most important elements of becoming a Christian. It's about other people rather than yourself now.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't just say it goes as far as other people too. You just said the word nature, and my Lisa was not a dog person to begin with, and we have 2 little dogs now. Like, she loves those dogs. Talk about transformation of the heart. And for us, we've got an ant colony in our house right now. Like, and that we're learning how to live in harmony with ants in our home, because we can't bear to, what we do for the least of these. We can't possibly harm an ant. Like, that's probably the most practical example I can give you of the fruits of our spirit. Is we really are super conscious of these little ants that God's created, and are now in our home.
We had an ant colony, but it was in a plastic tub, and it didn't work very well. We decided, because I thought I'm a bit short of money, I'll collect ants and I'll put them in the ant thing. Not realizing there were different ant colonies. I didn't really consider this, and we put them in, and then they were dead. So that didn't work so well.
That's a societal experiment there, right there.
Yes. What is this doing, Daddy? Oops. It looked the same to me. It's a rite of passage as a parent killing your child's pet. I mean, that's what you're doing it accidentally. So you've had this life transformation. Yeah. You've gone from just not being in step with one another as a couple. You're married, you're together, you've got children, you're trying to live life the best you can. But I guess you might explain it as there's something missing that's not quite getting you to work together. Then you have this experience that leads to you wanting to do something with faith for yourself. What was the first thing that you did when you'd actually had that experience and it led to, I need to change who I am. I need to actually make a commitment of some sort here to God. What was the first kind of thing that you got involved with after all that had happened? You thought, well, okay, let's get involved in my local church or whatever sort of situation. What's the first thing you got involved with?
Yeah, so obviously this was kind of late 2019. So I was starting to commit to going to church more regularly. And then obviously we know what happened at the start of 2020. I was part of the first ever Alpha cohort that our church did online. So I went through that. And Andy, I don't do things by halves. If I'm in, I'm in, and I guess once I'd made that commitment, my mind, books, podcasts, I've been running a podcast since 2018, and the irony is, many of my early guests from America, they're all Christians. I didn't have the eyes to see or the ears to hear. I had Gemma Hunt, on the podcast. She's from our local town. I wanted to interview her about her time on Swashbuckle. I had no idea of her kind of connection to faith. I didn't have the ears for it. And yet, one of the things that I was then able to change, I was able to seek out great mentors, seek out great teachers, and I've been blessed with some really great Christian leaders. One of those along the way is John Eldridge. John Eldridge wrote a men's book called Wild at Heart, and it was probably a lesser known book that really impacted me the most, which was Fathered by God. And I guess what you were touching on earlier is that you had some great men in your life, like mentoring you. This book did something for me spiritually at a time when I just needed to hear whatever John had written in that book. And it allowed me the space and the grace to be refathered by God in a way that then opened me up to elders, to church elders, I honestly, because I grew up with a single parent mum who never complained, who always was happy-go-lucky, but never asked for help. I've always had that kind of mentality too. Like, I'll figure it out. I don't ask for help. Hey, you win some, you lose some, right, along the way. But now was a time I couldn't just fall on that strategy. I built this wonderful life, and I needed some wisdom to know how to keep it, to know how to keep this marriage, to know how to be the best father I could be. And so I guess that moment in time, I surrendered. I literally opened up to the wisdom that was already there that I just couldn't see to begin with.
Which is something I've heard a few folks say, that there's always different journeys, right? There's one God and there's one Jesus, there's one path to Jesus, but to God, but there are lots of routes that we can begin from. And I think one of those is how we, or where we get that wisdom from. How does that enter into our life in such a way that it means something to us, and that can be different? For me, I had these three different guys. I'm not in touch with any of them anymore. That's in the past, and that's okay, because I've moved on, I got married, and life happens. But they imparted different parts of wisdom into me, and I guess it took God three men to help me out, because I was in a bit of a mess. And then I got married to my wife Jo, who in so many ways helped me to feel safe enough to be the man that I should be, because I didn't really understand what that meant. I a pretty abusive childhood, which wasn't great. And then I meet my wife Jo, who just enables me to feel confident to try to be me. That makes sense, because it was hard. But then I have someone like that who comes along and says, "Well, you can do this. Go for it. I'm behind you. That's why we've got a radio station. Yeah, go for it." And that sort of a character, it transformed how I thought about life, the world, me, what I can achieve.
Well, we see this in the archetypal stories all the time. Is the presence of the princess that pulls out the warrior and the king. It's there's a journey we have to go from being this prince to becoming a king, and it is the presence of the princess that pulls that out of us. And I guess in Jesus' terms, he says, "No greater gift has man than to lay down his life for those that he loves." I think men have to get to a point. The samurai would have done this, the warriors would have done this, where they contemplate their death. For what is worthy of a cause for me to lay down my life? And in my early days, you heard it was my life was the premium. It was my happiness was the premium. Well, something has to form within us where we realize that cause is outside of us, and nothing like the beauty of our dear ladies to bring that out, and our children. So, I think that's a really powerful thing for us to really contemplate is, to what would we, or to whom would we lay down our life? And I think that's a really powerful thing.
It is, because it makes us reflect a bit on who we are, because we're not just random. I have this phrase I use, lots of phrases, which is that we're made on purpose with a purpose. Because I don't believe we're randomly here just because. I just don't believe that. Fate is an interesting concept that I don't believe in fate. I don't believe that at all. But I believe we have choice over life. And I really do believe that we are made on purpose and with a purpose by God, who loves us, who designs us, who handcrafts us in our mother's womb, as the Bible talks about. Because that's how much he cares about us. In Genesis, you hear about all the amazing stuff of creation, and God, spoke it into being. And yet he makes us with his hands. And it really helps you to remember just how important and special and unique and honored we are as human beings in God's sight, which reminds me of the importance that I need to make a difference in the world. Not because I need to fix the world, because that's ridiculous, but I need to make a difference because God took time over me. So, I want to take time for him.
And there's that, which is, in our faith, Lisa and I have accountability higher than each other, so we haven't got to be the one pointing the finger and correcting each other. Like we know that we have higher kind of accountability to have, and then what that also does is it reminds me that she's a child of God, and I've been entrusted, the stewarding of that relationship, and when I take it from a godly perspective, when I really take that principle, what you just said, that there is no accidents, there's meaning. Well, like there's a responsibility there that not to take too seriously, but to honor and respect, and actually, wow, like what a privilege it is to journey, to journey with each other.
And it truly is. There was a thing going back a while where teaching in churches, you get married and you'll complete each other and you'll really help each other and you'll fix each other, and lots of marriages were in tatters because that's incredibly stupid. Because marriage is one of those things where it bears all of our insecurities, all of our failings, just are made vulnerable, and which is why getting married isn't going to make you suddenly better. Actually, it might be the other way for a little while, and that's okay. But then as we start to reveal that and work together, now you've got two people. And this is something that I've always kind of reflected on, is that there aren't two halves, it's one person. Amen. It's not two pieces, it's one thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing that made me angry to begin with, was just the teaching that you had to put God before marriage, right? So I was like, great, I'm already below the kids, and now this God guy is like pushing me down the hierarchy. Whereas the reality is that when we both walk in harmony and communion with God, we remember our belovedness, we remember our wholeness, we remember that all that we seek is within, and that transforms the marriage, because I come to my marriage seeking to serve, seeking to share the love that it's that idea of how can you give something you don't have? How can I love my wife if I don't already have? So we want to be the type of marriage where we serve from the overflow, and so often life takes and takes and takes, and I think we weren't anchored in our faith, and therefore we weren't being redeposited back into. So when the world got the rest, the best of us, then, well, we got the rest of us, and actually with faith, with God, we're almost tapped up into the mains now, which is absolutely transformational.
I love that, tapped into the mains. That's a very good analogy. I remember years and years ago, there was a church I was at, and the pastor said, I've learned this from some of our youth workers, which was not my idea, but he was inspired by what we were doing with object lessons. And he took this glass that was empty, and he took this jug that was full. And he said, so often we come to God and we put a little bit of water into the glass and we have a little drink. He said, I've had my drink of water. And then we go on. But actually, God doesn't want us to take a little drink. He wants us to really drink in. He put a bit more water in, and he drank a bit more water. It's like, well, we're getting there now. God's got an boundless, a massive supply. And he started pouring the water in until it was overflowing. He said, that's what God wants us to understand, is not a little bit and a little sip. He wants the water to be flowing in us and over us and through us and around us, that we can keep on drinking without thinking, where's the next bit of water coming from? Because with God, it's an endless supply of love.
I agree with you. If I'm portraying my marriage or my behavior to be like the best husband in the world, then I'm doing everyone a disservice, because the reality is, when we get to the end of ourselves, my solution now is to go spend more time with God, as opposed to Lisa needs to love me more. And I think that, it's not like I don't ever get to those moments where I'm at the end of myself, but I now have a different solution. I now have a different source of recovery. And, and I think that is effectively character refining. Character refining, and it's a muscle. It's something we're working on all the time. Do not take me as some form of teacher or prophet. Far from it, my friend. I'm just a humble guy trying to love my family and exist in the business world and marketplace in harmony with a loving Father. And applying the teachings that have been handed down to us over the last couple of thousand years, rather than just read them, actually live them. And they're pretty dangerous teachings if you actually apply them.
Dangerous in a good way. Let me share this. I don't think I've ever had cause to share this before, I remember when we'd been married for a few years, and I would look at my wife's relationship with God. And I'd been a Christian since the age of 7 when I chose to follow God. She was much older. She was very much a grown adult at university in France, and then she found God. So I've been a Christian a lot longer than she had, and my relationship in some ways was sort of, I suppose, more mature or longer along the line, not deeper, that's different. But she had a relationship with Jesus that used to really irritate me. I thought, I'm really jealous of the relationship you have with God, because I don't feel like I'm ever going to have that in my life, because I don't understand how you can have such a beautiful relationship that I can't have. And I got so stuck on, I can't have the relationship that you have with God, therefore I am jealous of your relationship with God, realizing not at all that actually I could have that same relationship with God if I stopped looking at her relationship with God and thought, hey, I'll start to pray and read the Bible more and spend more time with God, and then I won't have to be jealous of her. But there was that, I don't know, a bit of a disconnect, which I guess is why I wanted to talk about this. It came to mind, but there was a disconnect in my brain of, but I'm jealous of my wife's relationship with God, and she won't want me because now she's got God, and you can't have 1 + 1 because the numbers don't add up. Actually, they do. In fact, they add up even better because God's maths may not be human maths, but it's rather good.
Oh, it's multiplication for sure. Exponential multiplication in far deeper, greater ways than we could ever fathom for ourselves. So how's that working out for you now, Andy?
Well, we're married 30 years this year.
Great. Love
married
it.
6, yeah, married 30 years this November, which we want to celebrate because it was really hard getting married. We were not supported at all. Everyone thought, well, you know, she's pregnant, and no, not even close.
Mm-hmm.
We were just in love with each other and wanted to commit our lives before God, and being married was the most natural way of us serving God together without distraction, which we still do 30 years on. I work every day with Jo. She's in my life. She's my PA. So she's the reason if any like interviews like this happen, it's because Jo's made it happen. If I do that, I get into trouble with my diary. So I love the fact that I get to work with her every day. I work with my 3 boys every day.
I'm in a season of seeking wisdom from people who have gone before me. So 30 years is a bit longer than the 2011, so 15 years. So I'm halfway. Andy, give me some wisdom. What does it take to be a godly man leading your, spiritual leadership in the home with your wife and sons? Do
you know, there's 2 bits of wisdom. One is not mine, and the other one isn't actually. Funnily enough, the first piece of wisdom I was given by my grandparents before I was married. And they said, Andy, what you need to do to have a good marriage, because they'd been married, they'd passed their ruby anniversary, way past that. They said, you need to play together. You need to eat together. You need to go to sleep together. You need to rest together. And they just kept on doing all these things together. And that always struck in my mind, because it's so easy to think, well, we'll do this separately, right? Because we're in a world of independence. Kids are 18 yet, get them out of the house. I mean, it's not biblical, but we understand why. But that's the attitude of splitting and separating rather than multiplication. So that advice is one I've given to a few folk: is go to bed together, get up together, pray together, eat together, make food together, gardening together, go for a walk together, go shopping together. We go on dates to the supermarket. It's not the most romantic destination, but you know what? We're spending time together intentionally, and that's the part that matters. And the second part is you've got to go to the Bible. We were looking at raising children, thinking there's all these books at the time. Where is this? 2003 or something, 2004. And there's all these books on how to be a parent. And I was thinking, well, there's some great advice in here. Some very great practical tips, how to make, processed food. It's really useful. But how do I raise my children? Where does discipline fit into raising children in a godly, biblical way rather than a worldly way? And we understand with God and Christianity, there are boundaries and there are consequences. So how do I apply that into raising children? So we just looked at, well, what would God do? There's consequences, right? So everything that our children do, there are consequences. And some of them aren't good and some of them are. And that's the application that we have. That's not my wisdom. That's just straight out of Scripture. Because God's ways with us are, there's consequences. That's the whole point of faith, salvation, heaven, hell. There is a consequence to our actions. Because ultimately, if we don't choose to follow Jesus, then we're going to go to hell. It's that simple. It sounds quite harsh. It's also very true. And I absolutely believe it. So there is a consequence. So that's built into Scripture. So again, another piece of advice, not my own. But we just go back to God and we pray. Here's one for you. So we went into children's ministry, not as children's ministry experts. We didn't have degrees or qualifications. My wife had done all sorts of work. I was a trucker. We weren't children's workers, but we had children. And we were Christians and we felt called to this. And the very first church we went to, everything that happened that came up, we don't know. What are you going to do? Don't know. give us a bit, and we go off and pray, and we'd say, okay, God, Holy Spirit, you there? Can we have some guidance? And we'd come up with these amazing ideas, and people say, wow, you guys are so clever. No, these are not our ideas, because these are really clever. And that's the difference, I guess, is you go to God and you ask him, and you wait sufficiently longer enough for him to have the honor of speaking into your life before you do, in order that you can gain wisdom. Because he's to say, God, what should I do? Oh, you're not talking to me. On we go. No, give him the opportunity and the honor to speak first, which means patience, which is really important. It's one of the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah, powerful. And the words together, Lisa, so since Lisa came on your show, she has played her first live show with Dan as for Kingdom's Cause, and you couldn't have written it. The way with which God had in store for her first performance, we were together, so we both traveled to Ireland. She opened and closed a corporate conference, which is just completely, a juxtaposition of what you would expect, right? And it's just God's humor all over it. Her gifts, her skills, her talents. And actually, when you zoom out at the conference, the theme was about love and leading with love and collaborating. So whilst it wasn't a faith conference, it was a corporate conference. It was for Kingdom's Cause at its essence. Everybody was in that room, sharing the fruit of the Spirit, sharing love and kindness, bringing more of the kingdom, whether they would use those words or not. And so for me to be there as a speaker, and for Lisa to be there as a band, opening, closing together, just a wonderful kind of time capsule moment for us to have experienced together. And we couldn't have made that happen ourselves.
But that together part, it does matter, because when you intentionally do stuff together, things change. Yeah. But they change together, which is the whole point. Because if we're always doing stuff apart, how do you then grow together? Now, I know lots of couples who have very different lives and they spend time apart. This isn't about the time you spend together being more or less, therefore it's good or bad. It's when you're spending time together in a situation that you're in, are you wanting to intentionally spend that time together, or are you just in the same room at the same time? Which is where the separation comes. Because you don't get closeness from being close together. It actually happens from intentionality of wanting to grow deeper and to learn more. I try and become more like my wife every day, because I admire her in so many ways of who she is, her past when she met Christ, the jobs that she's done, the way that she mothers our children. There are some parts I'm not going to imitate because she's female. She's not me. It's great. But the male and the female complement each other really, really well. But there are other parts of her I just think, I want that prayer life. I want that desire to know God more. And I've never, ever caught up with her. And I'm okay with that, because I've always got something to aim to.
And do you know what? Sometimes the fruit of the Spirit is like the unlovable bits that we feel called to love.
Yep. And she loves me very well as a result.
Yeah, 100%.
So what's your day-to-day? I mean, I know let's go back to the start of the conversation, because we've gone off on quite a nice little detour today. What's your day-to-day job, and how can you help people who are listening?
Yeah, so I'm really just helping people journey in this lifetime, understand who they are, what they have, so that they get the clarity to bring that to the world in service of others. 1 Peter 4:10 says that we have gifts and skills and talents, and he calls us to use them in service of others. And I provide a service to help people discover what that is, and to structure it should you want to bring that to the world as a business, as a charity, as a community, as a podcast, however you wish to express that. That's kind of what I do. It's always better than yesterday. Coaching, community, and podcast.
If people are thinking, sounds like a nice chap, how can they make contact with you if they want to find out more specifically about how you can help them work together?
Very kind of you. The website is 4 letters. It's abty.co.uk.
See, that's cool. ABTY. Remind us what it stands for.
Always better than yesterday.
ABTY. And the last bit of the website, which has completely gone out of my head as soon as I said it.
abty.co.uk.
Thank you, abty.co.uk. Ryan Hartley, this has been a pleasure. Now, I said before we started this interview, I was going to play for Kingdom's Cause, because I think for both our sakes, that would make sense. So I'm going to play the latest song that we've been sent by your wife. It's called Lead. It's an amazing track. I watched clips of it when it was on Insta, and I thought, yep, can we have it now, please? Because this sounds really, really cool. It's really good.
Can I share some exclusive news?
Oh, go for it.
So Bleed will form part of For Kingdom's Call's debut album. It's called Messages for Warfare, and it's out Friday, May 22nd.
May 22nd. Jolly good. I'll have to get Stephen to set up an interview to do that stuff.
Yes, sir.
On the rock show. It is decent rock. How would you describe For Kingdom's Cause as music?
Oh, it's just all out heart, passion, worship, and just, I don't know whether this is heretical or not, but I really believe that they are psalms. They are Lisa's wrestle with God. They are her journey through faith, and it's wholehearted. It's full, and I'm seeing people connect with it. That people, young mothers, are sharing it with their daughters, and they're finding a voice, a connection with faith that might not otherwise exist. And that's all Lisa seeks to bring, is that sharing her own experiences, how God's been there and present throughout those times. May that be a blessing to other people. So, yeah, may that album, may those tones, may those songs find the people who need to hear it. That's for sure.
I'm going to definitely state it's not heretical. Psalms are what David wrote. What we read as the Psalms, they were just David's wrestles with life, and they're recorded in the Psalms. So, yeah, and it's a good thing to do because it does help us to get our thoughts into order. Ryan, thank you. abty.co.uk. That's the website. We're going to play Bleed now from For Kingdom's Cause. Thank you, Ryan, for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. And bye for now.
Appreciate it, brother.